There's a man who once admitted to committing crimes in multiple states, but when investigators tried to piece together his movements, they ran into a terrifying problem. There were entire stretches of time where no one knew where he was, or what he was doing, or who he might have been watching. And the worst part? He didn't just act on impulse, he planned years in advance. This is the story of Israel Keys, a man who may be one of the most methodical killers in modern history. I want to thank everybody for coming and watching The Crime Abyss. Don't forget to leave a like and follow me so you can be notified when a new series comes out. I hope you enjoyed today's story. Let's get into it. If you saw Israel Keys in public, you wouldn't think twice. He looked like anyone. A construction worker, a neighbor, someone was standing behind you in line at the gas station. He was calm, soft-spoken, even polite. And that's exactly what made him so dangerous. Keys was born in 1978 and grew up moving around frequently, eventually settling in rural areas where isolation became normal. There weren't many people, not many rules, and not much supervision. Over time, he became extremely independent, but also extremely secretive. As he got older, Keys joined the military, serving in the U.S. Army. To most people, that's where his story would seem normal. Structured, disciplined, predictable. But behind that structure, something else was forming. Here's where his story becomes different from almost every other criminal. Keys didn't just commit crimes when opportunity struck. He built a system, a terrifying one. He would travel to random states, places where he had no connection. Then he would bury something. Not evidence, not personal items, but tools. What investigators would later call kill kits. These kits contained things he might need later, items that could be used to carry out a crime. Then he would leave, and sometimes he wouldn't come back for years. Imagine that for a second. Somewhere in a completely random location, hidden underground, was a carefully prepared setup, waiting, not for days or for weeks, but for years. And no one knew it was there. One of the biggest ways law enforcement catches serial offenders is patterns, location, victim type, method. But Keys avoided all of that. He didn't stay in one place. He didn't choose one type of victim. He didn't follow a routine, which made him nearly impossible to track. Investigators would later say, if not for one mistake, he might never have been caught. One mistake out of years of planning. In 2012, everything changed. Keys traveled to Anchorage. At this point, he had already spent years perfecting his system. But this time, something was different. Instead of disappearing without a trace, there were signs. Small ones at first, but enough to start a chain reaction. Law enforcement began noticing irregular activity tied to a missing person case. At first, it didn't point directly at Keys, but as pieces started coming together, his carefully built system began to crack. Investigators tracked movements, financial activity, travel patterns, and slowly they started to close in, until finally he was stopped. When authorities detained Israel Keys, they didn't immediately realize who they had. At first glance, he was just another suspect. But then he started talking, and what he revealed was far worse than anyone expected. He described traveling across the country. He described planning things years in advance. And then he described the buried kids. Investigators were stunned because suddenly, this wasn't just one case. This could be many. Here's the part that still haunts investigators today. Keyes admitted to multiple crimes, but he never gave a complete list. There were gaps, large gaps, in the time, location, and explanation, which means there may be events that were never connected to him and never will be. Think about that. A system designed not just to commit the crimes, but to avoid ever being linked to them. One thing became clear during interviews. Keyes was obsessed with control. Not chaos, not randomness, control. He controlled when he traveled, where he went, what he prepared. Everything was intentional. And that's what made him so different. He wasn't reacting to opportunities. He was creating them. Today, the full scope of Israel Keyes' actions may never be known. Investigators have theories, possibilities, unanswered questions, but no complete picture. And that uncertainty is what makes the case so unsettling. Because somewhere, there could still be pieces of his story that were never uncovered. Some criminals act on impulse. Others follow patterns. But every once in a while, there's someone who plans so far ahead that even when they're caught, the full truth never surfaces. And that's what makes this case one of the most chilling to ever exist. Now that you have an understanding of who Israel Keyes is, we're going to go into the case of Samantha Koenig. There are crimes that are shocking, and then there are crimes that feel calculated in a way that's almost impossible to understand. Because in this case, the messages being sent, the photos being taken, were meant to prove someone was still alive, but they weren't. It was a cold night in Anchorage. 18-year-old Samantha Koenig was working a late shift alone at a small coffee stand. It was quiet. Nothing unusual, just another routine night. Until someone walked up to the window. At first, it didn't seem out of place. Customers came and went all the time. But this interaction was different. Something about it felt off. And within moments, everything would change. Samantha disappeared without a trace. No immediate witnesses, no clear signs of what had happened. Just silence. Days later, her family received something that would stop them cold. A message. It wasn't just words. It was a demand. Money in exchange for proof that Samantha was still alive. Then came the image. To anyone seeing it for the first time, it looked like proof. She appeared to be there, present, alive, but something about it felt wrong. Investigators began looking closely, not just at the message, but at the image itself. Every detail mattered. Lighting, positioning, even the smallest inconsistencies. And what they started to realize was chilling. The image had been carefully staged. This wasn't proof of life. It was something else entirely. Something designed to buy time. By this point, investigators were already beginning to connect the dots. The person behind this wasn't acting impulsively. This was planned. This was controlled, calculated. And that fits exactly who they would soon identify: Israel Keys. A man who didn't just commit crimes, he engineered them. The message, the image, it wasn't about panic. It wasn't rushed. It was part of a system, a way to extend time, a way to stay ahead. When Keys was eventually captured, the truth came out, and it was worse than anyone had imagined. Because by the time that message was sent, by the time that image was taken, Samantha was no longer alive. There are many tragic cases, but this one stands out because of the level of manipulation involved. It wasn't just the act itself, it was everything that came after: the planning, the staging, the deception, all designed to create a false reality, convincing enough to delay the truth. Israel is the one that went to their coffee stand that night, kidnapped her, and would eventually use her phone to send to her family and boyfriend. That way they would think that she was fine. She was just staying at somebody's house. He would take her back to his house and lock her in a small garage. In that garage, she would eventually die, and he would get a sewing kit and sew her eyelids. That way it looked like her eyes were open, put makeup on her, and sent that picture as the proof of life. And that's very disturbing. So the picture that the family got, that they thought was proof of life, was actually her already deceased. I can't imagine the hope that they must have felt, thinking that she was still present on this earth. And then later on, when they found out she was not, the heartache and the despair that must have caused. After all of this, Israel Keys was interviewed, and that's when everything from the beginning came out. Just how cruel and calculated this man really was. Cases like this leave behind more than just questions. They leave behind a realization that sometimes the most dangerous people aren't the ones that act on impulse. They're the ones who stay calm, think ahead, make everything look normal, even when it's not. And that's what makes this case in particular so difficult to forget. I hope that the family found some kind of peace. And I hope that Samantha Koenig, after all this time, can rest in peace. What happened to her was heartbreaking, it was a tragedy, and it shouldn't have happened to an 18-year-old just trying to work her job. So close to being a kid, just barely an adult. Life snatched away because of somebody else's sickness. I want to thank everybody for listening to The Crime Abyss. I do cases like this on a regular basis, at least once a week. If you like to hear stories like this, then this is the place you want to follow. Don't forget to give me a like, as that helps a lot. And if you can share it with other people, that would be greatly appreciated. So until the next story, I will see y'all next time. And as a parting last words, if you would like a certain case to be covered by me, all you have to do is send me a message. Thank you.